All right. I just want to talk for a minute about Trump and tariffs. There's been so much going on, and there's so much it's not misinformation. It's the term fog of war is really useful when events are happening fast because it is when you think about what that phrase is about, fog of war. It means there's so much smoke, there's so much chaos that it's really hard to tell who's winning, who's losing, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, what's true, what's not true, even which direction is north, south, east, west, right? And I think that when you get into these moments in time where so much is happening, it's really like we all jump to try to have a narrative to understand the thing and put it in a box and say this is what it is. But in doing that, we often overestimate how much we actually know because we're just too close to the events. So let's talk about the tariff blow up, and obviously the market has been, on a real on a real bender lately, and I'm not gonna. I'm gonna try to give you my honest opinion and hopefully a way to kind of put both sides in perspective. But I want to start out the gate. Say my opinion is that the I don't know that the tariffs themselves are as much of a mistake as the way Trump went about the tariffs. Right? Trump is a guy who shoots from the hip. He's the art of the deal. He's whatever. Whatever you think about all that. But the reality is that economics doesn't work that way, right? Economics, and there's a great Thomas Sowell video out there where you can see, I'll probably put it in the comments. There's a great Thomas Sowell video that he says it as good or better, obviously, than I do. But economics and businesses require like actual predictability, right? They need to be able to predict my sales for the next 6 months. I need to be able to know what tariffs are going to be and what taxes are going to be and what the financing rates are going to be. And without any of that, I am essentially cut off at the knees. And so either I have to take more risk than I want to take, or I have to just put my money in a bag and wait until next month to try to do something, right? And so I think that when you literally come out and throw a bunch of tariffs on something. Now, this is my opinion. Throw a bunch of tariffs on something that don't make a lot of sense. Even I'll grant you. Let's say this was a negotiating tactic, and that that Trump knows how to negotiate, and this was a negotiating tactic, and he always intended to come back to 10%. Now, I don't necessarily believe that's true, but I will concede it for the point that okay, it was a great negotiating tactic, and now he's back to 10%, and that's supposed to be everybody's like, oh, great, oh, I feel like I got a deal at 10%. But even if you say that, you have created enough doubt in the mind of investors and people who are deploying capital that they're going to start to second guess everything. And I don't think you want that, right? Like the right way to go about fundamentally changing the world order is to say, here's what we plan to do. There will be some sort of small review period where I will be discussing this with heads of banks and heads of world leaders and blah blah blah. But this is the plan, and this is the timeline, and then stick to it. And yes, there'll be some disruption, and yes, there will be, but you would kind of drop it out there slowly. This is why the Federal Reserve will spend months talking about raising rates before they actually raise rates, or the same thing, lowering rates. Generally, with lower rates, it's not quite as big of a deal because people are going to get better financing, and so they might take a little bit more risk to like drop rates faster without a lot of forewarning because they feel like that juices the market as opposed. But when they were raising rates back in 2022, they talked about it all of the end of 2022 before they actually started doing it in 2023, right? So, there's a reason for that. It's not just because the Fed is, slow. you know, it is because they want to make sure all the investors, all the people who have major money at stake in office buildings and capital resources, that they have time to like build that into their plan and aren't caught off guard. And there's a trust there, right? And um, Trump hasn't developed that trust. And so he just comes out, he drops a bunch of tariffs, and everybody's like, what? Like, this totally kills our sales forecasts and all the things, right? And whether or not you think that tariffs are good or bad, it is the abrupt and seemingly unplanned way in which it was done. Now, if he'd come out and offered what everybody thought he was going to do, which was like 10%, I think that would have gone over much better. That definitely would have been some uh, market reaction, and maybe they've gone down a little bit. But I think there would have overall, I think it would have been a lot less critical. But I think what happened was it was so much that all the big money in the investment world in the markets was like, oh, okay, we no longer have confidence that we can trust what this guy says, that he cares about us. And then repeatedly, people were asking him about the market, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care." And so, and anyway, so that's what I think happened, and I think that lack of understanding that investment and risk management requires some level of stability to be able to function was a huge mistake on his part. Now, I think I think the left is really focused on that tariffs are a huge mistake. And you're going to hear them talking about how biggest self-inflicted wound, and it's so bad, and it's going to bankrupt America and create economic Armageddon and all those sorts of things. I think the left is probably being a little unfair to tariffs, right? Like I'm less concerned with tariffs than I am a trade war, right? And so I think you could differentiate those two things and say, listen, what the world and the economy needs is order and predictability. And if you want tariffs, I think if you're going to say, hey, we're going to do this in a very disciplined way, but we want to raise tariffs because we need to reinvigorate manufacturing in the U.S. and reduce dependence worldwide. We're going to do 10% across the board. And you don't play this game of, oh, but we're going to punish China more. Oh, and we're going to punish Vietnam more. Oh, and we're going to punish, Canada or whoever. Where it is not a game of negotiation. It is a game of setting the rules of the new system. I think that is, you can do that in a way that doesn't wreck the economy and doesn't create a Great Depression. Like, I think the idea that, hey, tariffs equal Great Depression, tariffs equal financial ruin. I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that if you do it in a non-combative, non-punishing, non-retaliatory, non-war-like way, and do it in a very simple, broad, treat everybody equally way, then possibly you could have done it and have it not be a disaster. 10% tariffs not going to destroy the world economy, right? I mean, it would be a recession for sure, but where was I going with that? Oh, but what he's done now is he started a trade war, right? And so not only do you have the tariffs, which would already been an adjustment, but now you have a trade war, and no one is actually sure where that's going to stop. And we are currently very dependent on China. So, like, if you're going to start a trade war with China, it might help to just have low tariffs on China for a while, and then incentivize bringing your manufacturing back and make sure that you can produce your own penicillin and things before really blowing up the trade war. I think that would be a fair criticism of Trump. But I think the narrative that tariffs in of themselves are a disaster, I think that's a bit overblown. On the right, I think what the right is telling you is, oh, Trump is a genius. This was all a plan to box China into a corner, isolate China from the rest of the world, and get better trade deals. And I don't know. I don't know where the evidence of that is, right? Like I think there is a group of people who will constantly try to tell you that Trump is always a genius and everything he does is like four-dimensional chess. And I will say that sometimes with the media, there's a little bit of that. He's really good at media, right? I think he probably is really good at making deals because he's willing to be so unhinged. But none of that negates that what is Trump trying to accomplish? Like not every policy is a deal that you're trying to negotiate, you know, and if the goal was to get deals, you do that one at a time and not in some sort of broad strokes on everybody, right? That's policy. And Trump not understanding the difference between policy and deals and when to use policy and when to use deals, I think has been a major setback. So those of you who think Trump's a genius, like we're going to see how it works out. Like if the economy suddenly, you know, all the tariffs go to zero and the economy suddenly just takes off, then I'll give it to you. I'll be like, yep, he was a genius the whole time. He's the biggest free trader ever and blew up the economy. But we'll have to wait on the evidence of that. The other narrative you'll hear on the right is that, well, he's trying to get interest rates low because there's a bunch of commercial real estate that needs to be refinanced. And those financiers, the people who own those buildings, you know, they have to roll over that debt fairly frequently. There's a debt wall. They need interest rates to come down, so they need to put some pressure on the market to come down, so the Fed can bring interest rates down. And that is. Potentially a real strategy they could have had. Absolutely. I think the implementation has been so bad that it completely undermines what that strategy was, because what the implementation was is, you know, bull in a china shop. I'm going to wreck the global economy, and I don't give a you know what. And that has created in a world where everything is propped up on liquidity and fiat currency and all these sorts of things, you know, the global market is more fragile than it appears often. And there's often tons of leverage, tons of borrowing behind the scenes, doing side deals and side bets, just like if you watch The Big Short or any of those things. And so to just kind of charge in, like you're just going to blow up the world and nothing bad's going to happen. Like, I mean, whatever your plan might have been to bring interest rates down, that is, you know, the risk that you take. And I think in this case, I do think it was too much risk. And I think, I don't think Trump has capitulated. I think a lot of people on the left say Trump has caved. Well, I don't think he caved. He backed off a little bit, and we'll see where that goes. I have a feeling what we're going to see is just psychologically, he's backed off a little bit, and the bond market wants to see him capitulate, right? Like they want to see him understand that the house of cards falls apart if you do this, and so you better not do this. And I think they're going to continue to. I think we'll probably continue to see market sell off until he does that. Now, I will grant you, the market is up 83% in the last 2 years, and I don't think people feel 83% better off. So, you know, there may be a very superfluous connection between the market being good and the actual economy and people like thriving. And I think that to be fair to the right and be fair to Trump, I'm not sure. I do think the market is overcooked. I do think there's way too much speculation and people, I've been on the record saying like I hate Bitcoin, like not because I don't think it is a good alternative to fiat currency or whatever. It's nothing to do with Bitcoin itself, but it's the idea that we're living in a society where somebody who buys Bitcoin can now be a billionaire because why? What value did they provide to society by buying Bitcoin? None. Society as a whole, like the way markets are supposed to work is, in a naive free market world is like you produce value, you get rewarded for that value, and the government should let you be rewarded for that value. But what we've become is you speculate and you get rewarded for that speculation. If you're providing value as someone who's an accountant or a doctor or owns a small store or whatever, if you're providing value in those ways, you're getting screwed right now. Like inflation is hurting you, taxes and regulation are hurting you, all those sorts of things. So I resent that we're in a world where so much speculation is rewarded, and I think it creates kind of a toxic culture. And so I think to the extent that the right that is motivating the right, I totally agree. I think there's a lot of good reasons to say, hey, so what if the stock market goes down 20%? So what if it goes down 30%? You know, there's a lot of people out there who won't be, who aren't helped by it going up or down, right? Now, the flip side of that is that over the last 30 years, we've pushed most of America's retirement into markets and into funds. And, you know, so it's not the victims of the market going down 30%, not all rich people. In fact, the rich people are probably going to be okay. This is sort of like the you know, the left always wanting taxes on the rich. And the argument is like, I hear you, but, you know, rich people are going to figure out how to get out of their taxes. And so you got to make sure if you're going to tax the rich that you don't end up in a situation where the only people actually being hurt are the, you know, not yet rich, but doing okay people who are, you know, maybe upper middle class or whatever. Because then you create like a real drag on productivity and investment. And I think the same goes here, which is like, hey, you want to say, oh, it only hurts the rich people to crash the stock market to 20%. I think that is super, super dangerous, because the reality is rich people are probably going to be okay. They already got out, and now they're getting back in to buy up the you know, to buy at the lows and catch the rip, to sell it and to, you know, basically use you and your speculation as exit liquidity. So like, you know, at the end of the day, if the market goes down 30%, the people who are going to be hurt the worst are, you know, the pensions and regular people's 401ks. So, you know, I think that attitude that the right has had about this stock market sinking is, you know, I don't think it's particularly. I think it's kind of dumb and insensitive, because lots of people's 401ks are really important, and they're getting crushed right now. So, and I'll come back and do another video on this idea, but this is why I kind of been saying that, like, Trump's desires to like rebuild the American economy the way he wants it, with like manufacturing and middle class jobs and tariffs and all these sorts of things, is at odds with his desire to bring down the debt. And I think that the reality is the only way. You can't do both at the same time. You have to choose one of those and accept that the other one will have to hold off for a while. And it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Anyway, I think I've gone on enough. I always like to tell people, like, in these kind of heady times when things are crazy and some people get scared, things are never as bad as they seem, and things are never as good as they seem. So always beware when you're really scared or when you're really euphoric, because you're probably going to be brought down a notch or probably be brought up a notch. So I think we're going through pretty unique times, but I also think there are paths that could still work out okay. So like, I don't know that we're in, you know, total meltdown mode. I said that before COVID too. So like, you know, take that with a grain of salt. So, all right. That's it. And I'll see you next time.